Hi everyone, this is Katie Sweetman with Empowering Astrology, and this is your weekly look at the astrology of April 20th to 26th, 2020. I've been kind of starting these Facebook Lives like a little late because I've been doing these daily meditations for the last 4 weeks. It was something that I felt called to do and felt called to do as a means of service during this time to kind of create some sacred space online for people to gather and to work on their energy, and knowing that when we start to shift our energy, that allow others to also shift their energy. I just, as a like technical side note, I'm testing out some new software and how I do my Facebook Lives. I'm actually doing this from a third party software, so it looks like everything is okay on your end. So please pop a comment into the comment section if you're watching live and let me know if you are seeing this and hearing this. So let's take a look at the astrology, and I do hope that you all are well and you are staying safe and staying home. I know that this is sort of an interesting time. It's certainly an unprecedented time, or maybe it is precedented because there certainly have been times in humanity where we've had to deal with things like this. I think what's unprecedented is just the how disconnected we are from kind of these daily lives we were having up until February. But provided you all are well and able to use this time in a way that creates some positive change in your life, that's my biggest hope for you all. And I know that there's a lot of uncertainties and what this time is going to mean financially and whatnot. My hope is that there's some, astrologically at least, some shifts and things May going into like June, the end of June. We've got Mars going into Aries on June 27th. It will be in Aries for 6 months. We got 6 months of Mars being in the sign that it's right at home in, and we're all going to have a lot of energy to use, and Mars and Aries is like putting gas in the car and going someplace. So we're gonna have to see how it all plays out. I'm not technically what's called a mundane astrologer, which is where you look at more of the kind of the geopolitical side of things, but it's something that I pay attention to as an astrologer. But let's look at the astrology this week. And hi, Judy. I see your comment. Thank you very much. It's Taurus season. I'm so excited. I'm not excited that I'm in home for Taurus season. And I wrote this in my Instagram update for today. I actually really like Taurus season. It's a season of food and pleasure and grazing and baking, all these things that I love. Side note, I really like to bake. I'm a really good baker. I'm known for my cakes. I've actually been using quarantine to try to perfect my pita making skills. I don't know. I like flatbread. And I make a really good hummus, just FYI. But yeah, Taurus, earth, food, money, pleasure, sexuality. This is the season that we're in. Taurus is the first earth sign, which means it's about earth, the element earth, and its most rudiment quality. It's the soil, it's the ground beneath our feet, it's the resources we need on a very basic level to survive and thrive. Taurus has this deep instinct, and it's a good instinct, except when it's not a good instinct. It's this deep instinct to gather and to preserve life. So this is a season where, at least here in the Northern Hemisphere, here in the Northeast, when I actually can go outside with a mask, you're seeing the flowers bloom, you're seeing the trees kind of come back to life. And it's a time when we sort of really see the life and the fertility of life. It's a season of renewal. And another comment that I made on my Instagram today is, as a Scorpio, and my season is the end of October and November, when life is doing the opposite. It's coming to the end of its life cycle. So I think it's just a reminder, not to kind of downplay the things that are going on, the real things that are going on, but even in our darkest moments, we have this kind of cyclical nature, and we return back to Taurus, we return back to the energy of life and to sweetness and to comfort and to feeling safe. Taurus is very much a security-minded sign. And I was having a video update with one of my closest friends who's a Taurus, and she just like casually mentioned that she had this apartment that she owned in Brooklyn. And I was like, how did I not know you had this? But I was like, of course you do. You're a Taurus. You just have things. You just accumulate things. So we're going to be very mindful over the next 4 weeks of stuff that we own, the stuff that we want, the stuff that we need. And maybe this is a time when we're kind of, creating some inventory of the things that we own. Certainly if you live in a home and you're spending a lot of time in home, you're starting looking around and seeing what you've got. I've been using my time at home to sort of like look through my cabinets and like, is this spice still good? I found a bottle of spices that expired in 2003, and I'm like, oh my god, how did these spices make it through about 5 apartment moves? These spices are old enough to drive a car at this point, at least in the United States. Yeah, maybe you're kind of taking inventory of things. Maybe you're going through your closets. You're going, what clothes do you have? What food do you have? What do you need? What can you trade? What can you buy? If you're in the position to spend some money right now, it's a good time to work on recipes, because Taurus is food, to bake, to really take in the pleasure of eating. Sometimes when the earth element gets disturbed, meaning, we look at somebody's chart, there's like a deeper lesson about earth and really integrating that element, that people forget to eat. They forget to really get in touch with their bodies. There's an issue around touch and pleasure. So I think it's a time to really recapture that, get back to these very fundamental things that support life. There is, some things going on this week that kind of add a little bit of a caveat to everything that I just said, which I'll get to in just a moment. I'm just looking at the comments. Kimmy asks a good question, and I'm not a expert on your question, Kimmy. You asked if there's any similarities astrologically to the 1918 flu pandemic and now. Yes, you're absolutely correct. At the time of the pandemic, in late 1918, there was like what's called a conjunction of Jupiter and Pluto, and now there's a conjunction of Jupiter and Pluto. Beyond that, I'm not sure. And to be honest, I mean, when I looked into the astrology of this year, certainly I discussed this in different videos and my webinars, that there was going to be a shift in March. What I felt it was going to be more was economic, because a lot of the different indicators were pointing towards economic shifts. And well, that's kind of what we had, but a pandemic, that was not what I predicted. Just like an interesting side note, this pandemic, kind of has its roots around the eclipses, so eclipse season. Even though there were cases in November in China, and if not other places as well, kind of the first cases that we know of, like as a pandemic, began with that solar eclipse. In December 26th, we had a solar eclipse in Capricorn. 2 weeks later, we had a lunar eclipse in Cancer. You started to get the first recorded fatalities. Around the same time, we had a historic alignment of Pluto and Capricorn, 2 planets that had not been together in 40 years. And to give a little context, last time Saturn and Pluto were together in Capricorn was the 1500s. I think it was 1517. It was the start of the Protestant Reformation in Europe. So it's those 2 planets coming together, especially in Capricorn, talk about these seismic shifts in the world. So I didn't quite answer your question, Kimmy. That's definitely a research project, and I do sometimes go down these astrological research holes, because I'm just like, what is going on? Like, where's like what's the astrology of pandemics and sickness. Interesting, the pandemic, at least here in Western Europe and in the US, was kind of came out during Pisces season. And I always think of Pisces being illness and recuperation and hospitals. And I don't know. So we have two more eclipses coming up, actually three eclipses, but two more in Cancer and Capricorn. One that's going to be on the 21st of June in Cancer at 0 Cancer, and one that's going to be on the 5th of July at 13 Cancer. And those two eclipses round out this whole series that began in July of 2018 of eclipses in Cancer and Capricorn. So there's my prediction, not my hard and fast prediction, but my prediction is that there's going to be something around this whole story with the pandemic, with the eclipses in June. We do have another eclipse on June 5th. That one is going to be in Sagittarius, which means the nodes are shifting into Gemini and Sagittarius out of Cancer and Capricorn. My sort of like my armchair political astrologer is saying, okay, what's going to happen when the nodes go into Gemini and Sagittarius in May? Because these are two signs that are the signs of travel. So does this mean we get to travel, we get to move in our neighborhoods because the North Node will be in Gemini? Doesn't mean we can't foreign travel because the South Node will be in Sagittarius, but that remains to be seen. I'm just checking in on the comments. Yeah, Laura laughed at my joke. Thank you. I'm a Sagittarius rising. I just want people to laugh at my jokes. That's really all I want in life. So yes, hi, and thank you all for joining me for this week's look at the astrology. So this week we have a Taurus New Moon. We have a Taurus New Moon on April 22nd. So this is Wednesday. And that new moon makes what's called a conjunction to Uranus. So I want you all to think back to March of 2019, maybe even May of 2018. I'll throw that in there as well. And astrology is just about understanding time, understanding cycles of time, understanding our relationship with time, and understanding how we live time, like live our own time, because we are born at an exact moment in time where the planets are all situated in a certain way. And that becomes how we live time on a personal level. But then there's collective time. There's time for your sign. I'm a Scorpio, so there's Scorpio time, and there's Scorpio time that all Scorpios are living. And then there's collective time, there's great time. But back in March of 2019, which I remember that month very well because that was a pivotal month for me, Uranus went into Taurus. And why this was a big deal? Because Uranus is a slow-moving planet. It's what's called an outer planet, meaning its rotation around the sun, ergo its rotation around the zodiac, is pretty slow. So Uranus spends 7 years in each sign of the zodiac, and it had from 2010, 2011, up until 2018, 2019, it was in Aries. And if you're in Aries, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Your life turned upside down and inside out. So here comes Uranus, like a hand on the great clock, now pointing towards Taurus. And that was saying to all of us that how we do Taurus, how we do fertility, how we do stability, earth, food, money, has to radically shift. And if it's possible that you can look back and see a shift, a palpable shift since March of 2019, especially if you are a Taurus, if you're a Leo, if you're a Scorpio, if you're an Aquarius. For me, I left my Manhattan day job of 12 years in March of 2019 to become an astrologer full time. I'd already been doing this for 8 years previous, but it was always a side hustle. So that was my Titanic shift. What was your Titanic shift? Because regardless of what sign you are, regardless if there was a palpable shift or not, something began at that time, because Taurus represents a certain part of your chart. It represents what's called a house, And that part of the chart represents a certain part of life. So that part of your life is telling you that from 2019 all the way to 2025, 2026, you're going to see a big shift, a radical shift, transformation in that part of your life. Maybe you're already seeing that change. And so this new moon that we have on the 22nd, it's sort of like checking back in with this story. Now we're a year and change into Uranus and Taurus. It's not going to leave until 2025, 2026, but it's an ongoing story. It's worth your while, if you can, to make little notes over time and say what was going on these dates. If you have like a Google Calendar, for instance, you can just make a little note, or Taurus New Moon, what was going on in your life. Because when you go back, you're going to start to see a very clear story arc, because the astrology is driving a narrative. So this new moon is going to sort of shake things up. It's saying that over the next 4 weeks, we're going to see some sort of shift in your life. So we're going to quickly go around the zodiac so we all are tuned in to what this part of our life is. I do have an article in this new software that I'm using for the Facebook Live. I couldn't see a place to put in show links, so maybe that's something I have to do after. But I have a link on my site that says Uranus and Taurus sign by sign, and that's the thing you can refer back to. But let's quickly go through the zodiac so you know what part of your life has been seeing this shakeup and will continue to see this shakeup. So if you are a Taurus, the shakeup is you. And I've been telling my Taurus clients, and I've been telling you all in different Facebook Lives, that if you are a Taurus, the idea is that over the next 5-6 years, you're going to be a different person. There's some sort of awakening, radical reinvention. But the idea is Uranus just wants us to be free of any constraints, within reason, of course, that have been holding us back from being our true selves. We live in what I like to call a Saturnian world, meaning we live in Saturn's game. We have to play by Saturn's rules, but we can get very constricted, and we can not be ourselves, and we're afraid. And then here comes Uranus, this archetype of Prometheus, and bringing light. And this is why age 41, 42, 43 is very important when we have what's called the Uranus opposition, that, aka the classic midlife crisis, that we have to remember who we really are and what we came here to do. And that's when you start to see some big shifts in people's lives, when they leave their day job, they leave a marriage, something that has previously not been in alignment with the truth of who they are. So my Taurus people, you might even physically look different right now, or even over the next few years. Like, I can think of 2 Taurus friends. One has lost a ton of weight, one has transitioned. So they are physically looking very different at this time. So this new moon is sort of this check-in with this process of you becoming the real you. Hopefully this makes some sense and resonates. If you are an Aries, now this is the part of your chart that talks about money. It talks about how you earn it, how you make it, how you value it, the resources that you need, feeling safe and secure. And this is a part of your life that maybe since over the last 12, 13 months, if maybe even a little bit more, you've seen some changes in that department. So this is your check-in with how you earn a living. I think I did Taurus first instead of Aries. We mixed it up, but okay. I was I'm going out of order for a second. Just follow me. Aries. So Aries, you might be seeing the story unfolding about changing how you earn a living. And maybe if, God forbid, this time right now is shaking up your financial life, your wallet, and how you earn a living, you're going to need to innovate. Uranus loves innovation. How can you do what you need to do, but do it in a different way that allows you to kind of transcend your circumstances. Maybe everything's great, perfect, fantastic, but you're having a new relationship with the things that you own, the things that you spend your money on. The idea is that if we fast forward to 2025, 2026, you're going to see a completely different value system. Maybe you really liked something and spending your money a certain way, and then in 5, 6 years, it's going to be completely different. We will see. Gemini, this is the part of your chart that talks about your unconscious self. It also talks about spirituality and sort of this finding your internal truth. Only the truth that you can find within. So maybe you've seen a very subtle shift over the last 12, 13 months. Maybe you haven't, because this is Uranus is bringing light to your blind spots, the parts you can't see. So really pay attention to the downloads, the insights, the dreams that you're having right now, because that might be giving you insight to something that you can't see about yourself. It's unconscious. Or it's giving you insight to these deeper meanings. Maybe you're feeling very compelled to work on your spiritual self at this time. You're really digging into your mysticism, or you're digging into some sort of spiritual practice. If you are a Cancer, this part of your chart talks about friends, community, your social network. This is a time for you to really shake up the people that are in your social network. And so maybe you've seen some friendships change and shift over the last year. Maybe this is a time for you to really awaken and open to new connection, especially a Cancer if you've been struggling to find your people. Uranus might bring people into your life that are very different than before, but the idea that these people are more aligned, they can see you, you can connect with them. It's a conversation I have a lot with people. We're all living varied lives, but ultimately we want connection. We want to feel like we have community. So this is a time when that part of your life has to radically open and awaken. If you are, never mind my buzzer, if you are a Leo, you're in the midst of a career shift. So this is the part of your chart that talks about like your professional life, the role that you play in the world, your ambitions. And so this has been going on for a year, Leo, where you've needed to completely reinvent your professional life. And maybe you have made a radical career change in the last year. Maybe you are thinking about it and a little afraid. But this is when Uranus is really asking you to stick to your guns and do what you really want to do, not maybe something that's been imposed upon you. Yes, there is a need for stability and security in your professional life, and maybe you've been resisting something, because I will say, side note, that wherever Taurus is in our chart is an area that we are least likely to make drastic changes, yet the planet of drastic change is in Taurus. So we might be in that part of our life that I've been mentioning for you, or will mention for the other signs. You might be resisting that change really hard, or maybe you're embracing it. Maybe this is like liberating to you, or maybe it's bringing up a lot of deep emotions and fear. So really, sit with where you are with this process of transformation. So Leo, if there's some sort of career that you've been thinking in the back of your head for a while, then this is your moment. And God forbid if you've been sort of pushed into certain situations because of what's going on in the world, where now you have to make this leap. I'm not a Leo, but my chart ruler is in Leo, so I really resonate with this on a personal level as well. And I was having this conversation with a friend a couple days ago who was doing some business coaching with me, and she's like, oh my God, can you imagine trying to make this career shift now? I made it a year ago, but so my heart goes out to anybody having to make some late in the game changes right now. And I've been thinking a lot about if you how do I, even on a personal level, provide some information and support for people who want to know about how to make this transition into doing what they love, because that's what I do. So I have that background already. Anyway, side note. So moving on to Virgo. So this is a part of your chart that talks about how you see the world. What do you believe in? What sort of goes into that education of how what you believe in, how you see the world? It's worldview. And I think Virgo can sometimes get a little stuck because it's an earth sign, and I think that this is a time for Virgo to really awaken to seeing themselves and seeing the world differently. And maybe, sometimes Virgo can have its blinders on a little bit. So how do you open up? Maybe this is like really shaking up your philosophies in life, shaking up your faith, shaking up your religion, losing your religion, losing your faith, getting it back again. The idea is that you have a new vision on life, a new vision on the world by the time Uranus leaves Taurus. So, like I said, the Taurus part of our chart is the least likely to change. Yet, this is the part of the chart that talks about really needing to open your vision of yourself, open your awareness, open your consciousness, and leave behind the old beliefs that are not serving you anymore. Moving on to Libra. So, Libra, this is the part of your chart that talks about the deepest parts of yourself, meaning all your psyche, your fears, your insecurities. It's a very bringing that light of consciousness, that awakening of Uranus to the deepest parts of yourself. So, you're in the midst of doing some shadow work right now, and see what's coming up for you emotionally at this time. Maybe old themes around intimacy and vulnerability and security or even sexuality are coming up at this time. This part of your chart also talks about money, mostly money that comes in from other sources, whether it's a debt, whether it's an inheritance, whether it's a partner's money. So you might be seeing some financial themes at this time as well. It's sort of these maybe deeper questions around ownership and assets and who owns what and what are things worth. Moving on to Scorpio. So this is a part of your chart that talks about relationships, how you connect with people, how you socialize, how you interact. And Scorpio, like, you're going to see radical shifts in the relationship department over the next 5-6 years from now. The idea is that the people that you're connecting with is very different than the people that you're connecting with over the next few years. And Scorpio, you're gonna have to let people in. You're gonna have to like open up. Scorpio can be a sign that sort of has its protections on. It's what's called it's Mars ruled sign. So how do you feel safe and secure to let somebody in? How do you open up and be vulnerable? And this is not just romantic relationships. This is all relationships, because this is sort of like this one-on-one socialization and interaction. And yes, by the way, this does also apply to rising signs as well. So this might be a time when new people, with this new moon, when new people are coming into your life. There is some sort of new beginning that is indicative of a bigger shift. If you are a Sagittarius, this is the part of your chart that talks about health and wellness, how you take care of your body, how do you have that day-to-day ritual and practice and schedule. And if Sagittarius, the idea is that over the next 4, 5, 6 years from now, you have to have a radical shift in how you take care of your body, what you eat, your relationship with your body, and also the relationship with your day-to-day life. Your day-to-day life might look radically different than it did back in 2018. New surroundings, new office, new schedule, new practice. That's the idea. Uranus is trying to shake us out of our limiting routines and opening us up to something new. It's a time when, if you've wanted to make a major change in your diet, something that your body really needs or it's really healthy for you, this is your new moon to sort of like make that intention, whether it's going plant-based or you eat different type of diet, whatever works for you. I always tell people this is a time to really listen to what your body wants, maybe not necessarily what you want. Maybe going for a run is the most radical thing you can do right now. Like for me as a Sag rising, I started doing Pilates like pretty regularly. So everybody's different. If you are a Capricorn, this is the part of the chart that talks about you, meaning how do you express you? What's your persona, your personality, your identity? This is a time when you really need to shake up who you are. And maybe you think you're one thing, but Uranus is saying you're actually something else. Remember, Uranus is the planet of liberation, even if it means liberating us from ourselves and like the worst parts of ourselves. And it's also really trying to open up your creativity, open up your self-expression, open up the energy of play and sensuality. So really see how your personality and how you express who you are is needing to shift and change, and maybe how it has shifted and changed over the last 12, 13 months. If you are an Aquarius, this is the part of your chart that talks about home and family, where you live, where you're rooted, where you're planted. So really pay attention to the story about, I've kind of seen this in different ways for clients. Now, I've seen a lot of Aquariuses and Aquarius risings who have made major moves in the last year and plus. They've moved across country. They've left some home that they've been in a long time. Usually it's like symbolic of something. But this idea that that's the part of the chart that talks about our roots and foundation. So maybe the soil that you've been growing in up until now because of, let's say, family, the past, ancestry, trauma, you need to leave that soil. So how do you, Aquarius or Aquarius rising, really have that bravery to pull your roots out and put it someplace else, even if it's like an internal shift? Maybe it's not a literal shift or a literal move, but maybe it's an internal move, because you need to plant yourself somewhere where you're going to feel supported and nurtured. And if the old soil and the old foundation, it means if it's rotten or if it's, full of suffering because of past family traumas, then it's time to make that shift. So really see what's happening on an internal level, an emotional needs level, as well as an external level with your family at this time. If you are a Pisces, this is the part of your chart that talks about voice, communication, how you speak, how you listen, how you learn as well. It's about the mind. So this idea that you're in a 5-6 plus year story at this point where you might sound differently, you might communicate differently, you might think differently by the end of this time, because again, Uranus wants liberation. So how do you liberate your voice? And Taurus is the throat. Like Taurus rules the throat in astrology. So how do you open up that throat chakra? Are there any blocks there? Are there words that you've been afraid to say? If there's something that you have, like even singing or writing, maybe you need to write it instead of speak it. So Pisces, and this does include intuition as well. Pisces is a very intuitive sign. So really listen to how your intuitive voice needs to open up at this time as well. So that's a quick check-in with Uranus's journey through the 12 signs and how this week might shake things up. There are other things going on this week. Going into tomorrow, Tuesday, April 21st, the sun makes what's called a square to Saturn. And Uranus, not Uranus, have Uranus in the brain. Saturn is newly in Aquarius. So we had a time shift back in March when Uranus went into Aquarius. So that Aquarius part of our chart also is seeing a change. And when the sun makes the square to Saturn in Aquarius, we're kind of checking in with the story that's just begun and the story that's going to unfold until March of 2023. when when Saturn leaves Aquarius and goes into Pisces. So pay attention to where you're meeting resistance today, where you are hearing no, where you need to step up, and where you feel there's a personal milestone as well. Saturn's not always bad, but what Saturn wants us to do is to really commit to whatever that work is in that part of our chart where Saturn is right now. Going into later this week, I will say all this week as we get up to Pluto turning retrograde on Saturday, April 25th, we might be seeing some shadow themes come about. Now, when a planet changes directions, and we can feel this when Mercury turns retrograde, it means that its archetype saturates the collective in the days around what's called the station. And Pluto's archetype is the shadow. And so I often get this question, what does the shadow mean? We all have a unconscious part of ourselves. It is the self, the unhealed self, the self that we don't want to look at, the self that we project onto other people. Like this is like something out of psychology. But the shadow is something that actively works against us. So a client will say, I want a relationship, but the shadow self is saying, I don't want a relationship. And so there's a block. There's like a block of wants and needs. So you have a part of yourself that is actively going against a desire that you have. And then you have, let's say, in a relationship transit, and maybe it doesn't happen the way you really want it to. You want, meet somebody because you haven't faced the part of yourself that doesn't want a relationship, for example. So really pay attention to those shadow stories coming up this week, where we're being kind of confronted to look at ourselves in a deeper way, to look at our blocks, to look at the parts of ourselves, our proverbial demons that are actively working against us, because Pluto is giving us an opportunity to look and to see something that's normally invisible, that's normally buried in our psyche. I know everybody's just like, I don't want to do shadow work. I get it, but here we are. This is the week. Pluto is turning retrograde at 25 Capricorn, so it's in sort of a little bit of a hot zone with Jupiter. So it'll be kind of interesting to see how that's all working out with this whole story with the virus and the pandemic and quarantine. And then Mercury makes some prickly connections to Pluto and Jupiter into this weekend. Conversations might be a little provocative or challenging. We might, or revealing, because Pluto shows us what we haven't been seeing or haven't wanted to look at. And then here comes Mercury, the planet of communication and voice and choices, is kind of running up against Pluto and Jupiter. So something might come to the surface. And then lastly, the Sun makes its annual conjunction to Uranus on Sunday, April 26th. And this is, again, another little like awakening, a kind of another little energy of new beginnings and transformations and shakeups that I was talking about as I went around the zodiac. So there's a lot going on this week. I mean, at least within the last 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, April's been a bit of a tense month because we've just had some convergence of planets around this time, especially with Pluto and Capricorn. So yes, that's this week's astrology. By the way, I've been putting the audio of this on Spotify. So if you're listening on Spotify, hello and thank you. You can have this as a podcast. And of course, you can watch this replay. And if you're watching the replay, do say hello and tell me that you're okay and where you're watching from. I know that we are an international audience. And do follow me on Instagram and on Facebook if you don't already. I'm on Twitter as well. I've been putting these replays on IGTV, so if you're watching me there, hello. But yeah, we've got a lot going on this week. So I will be doing my new moon report on Wednesday. So do keep an eye out on what this new moon means on a little bit more of a deeper level. So Lovely to connect with you all. Thank you for watching. Thank you for commenting. And we will check in again next week. All right. Take care. Bye.